As the war in Ukraine edges close to the 1-year mark, it's necessary to take a good, honest look at where things are at. And we've got to assess what's a realistic outcome at this point. Now, last week, General Mark Milley, the chairman of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, gave Ukraine's chances of forcing Russia out as slim to zero. And as the Australia's Washington correspondent Adam Creighton writes today, for almost a year we've read how Vladimir Putin is on the verge of death and Russia, enfeebled by Western sanctions, is about to collapse. None of this has happened for all the billions spent and lives lost, and there's precious little evidence it will. Perhaps negotiated peace is better than endless carnage. I'm delighted to say that Adam joins me now. Adam, thanks for your time. There's no doubt the Ukrainians have put up more of a fight than anyone would have imagined, but that's not necessarily good enough reason for a war to continue in its current form, is it?
Yeah, look, this is a human tragedy, obviously, epic human tragedy. There's been 100,000 deaths on the Ukrainian side, the US government says, about 100,000 on the Russian side as well. And of course, no one, or certainly not me, is condoning what Russia's done, but we have to be realistic about the outlook from here. And to me at least, and to other observers too, I think we need to be realistic and realise that, Russia is right next to Ukraine. The idea that Putin is going to suddenly withdraw from Ukraine for peace talks seems completely absurd. I mean, it's one of the core aims of Vladimir Putin and indeed Russia for a long time to ensure that Ukraine does not become part of NATO, and that's what they're trying to do. It seems to be a stalemate at this point, but there's every likelihood that there'll be another assault from Russian forces in coming weeks or months, and unless the US and the European allies are willing to throw in, further tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars eventually, then it's hard to see how Ukraine is ultimately going to prevail.
Yeah, Adam, I happen to agree with you. I've been struggling with the competing rhetoric, I've got to say, about this war for a very long time. I mean, we're told repeatedly that Putin is a madman and he could do anything. And yet it seems that no one has a rationale or an interest in de-escalating the tensions. Instead, they want to escalate them. They want to leave him no way out, which might push him to a nuclear response. Now, if I go back last year, I remember Henry Kissinger saying we should negotiate. And he was the man who, on this day in 1973, negotiated an accord to end the Vietnam War. So is it time that we put diplomacy in here, recognising that this is an intractable situation and we don't want World War III?
Yeah, look, it certainly is time in my view, and this idea that Putin's crazy or a madman, this is a very new invention. I mean, he's been the leader of Russia essentially for 20 years, and he was regarded as a rational actor until now. There's constant chatter that if he succeeds or prevails in any way in Ukraine, then he's going to attack Finland or attack the European Union in some way, and that's the main justification, as I see it, for continuing to support Ukraine. But I just don't think that there's any evidence that Putin is going to attack Europe or Finland or Poland. I mean, he's never said that. I mean, he said for 20 years in various speeches that Russia would not allow Ukraine to become part of NATO, and he said if it looked like that was going to happen, then Russia would invade, and so that's exactly what's happened. So I don't see any evidence that he has ambitions beyond Ukraine. I mean, maybe he does. We don't know inside his head, but we just have to look at what he said and how he's acted. And to stress again, I'm not condoning on what he's done, but he's now done it, and we have to deal with those facts. I mean, it's worth stressing too, I think, from the point of view of Australia. I mean, which has generally been very supportive of the US, very supportive of Ukraine, and that's completely understandable. But as the US Navy Secretary said only just last week, I mean, this is draining the resources of the US Navy and the US military. Now, I mean, if we expect the US to support us in some future confrontation, be it with China or whoever, then we can't afford to have the US completely bogged down in Ukraine. I mean, resources are finite, and I think that's what the US now is slowly starting to realise.